Hello, and welcome to another episode of Untraditionally Traditional, a podcast with me, Brittany Duncan, a millennial homemaker. Join me each week as I share all the things I've learned that make keeping your home, garden, and life running smoothly, all while working. If you are enjoying the podcast, please be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcasting app so you get the episodes downloaded straight to you every Monday. Now, on to today's episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Untraditionally Traditional, a millennial homemaker. This is your host, Brittany Duncan, and as promised, today we're going to talk about meal planning and prep, specifically how to save time in the kitchen without sacrificing nutrition or flavor. To help me tackle this topic, I am joined by Melissa Knific. Melissa is a busy mama too, who knows how challenging it can be to cook after a long day. She is a recipe developer, cookbook author. Her recipes and content have been featured in the New York Times, HelloFresh, and on Rachael Ray. In fact, her work as food director of Rachael Ray In season has been celebrated by the Eddie Awards. For those of you who work outside of publishing, this is a big deal. Melissa, I am so excited to have you on the podcast and dive into how we can tackle meal prep with smart, flavorful shortcuts. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. So I'd love to take it a few steps back, actually way back to the beginning before you got your culinary degree, because I imagine, like myself, most listeners think of themselves as humble home cooks. So what made you want to pursue the path of taking your journalism career into the food space?
So yes, way back. Food has always been central to my life. It's always been important with my family. I come from, lots of different cultures in my background. And so my grandparents, always had amazing food at their parties and family get-togethers. And my mom, she's perhaps the most influential cook in my life. And so, while food has always been important ever since I was a kid, it wasn't until later that I recognized how much I was drawn to it. And I had gone to school for journalism. And so I started as a newspaper reporter and I dabbled in some food writing then. But once I moved to New York and I stayed in journalism but shifted careers a little bit and took a trade magazine job in the city. And that was in something completely different. That was in fashion. Food, fashion, all the things we love in life. So I did that. But while I was, a couple years in, I realized, I really, really love food. My mom had just enrolled in culinary school. She was an empty nester, and although she's always been an amazing cook, she decided that it was time to do something for herself, and so she went to culinary school. And again, I was working, and I said, I'd love to find a way to combine my journalism career with food. So I enrolled in culinary school, and then I always knew that I wanted to come back to media in some way. So I did, and ended up at a magazine. I don't know if you remember it, but it was called Family Circle. And I worked in the test kitchen there, and that's where I got my start in food editing and recipe development.
Gosh, that's so cool. I did not realize that your mom had gone, and that was kind of like the catalyst or inspiration for you to go to culinary school. That's really neat. And gosh, like, good for her for, later in life deciding, like, I'm going to do this for myself and taking a leap like that. It's very inspiring. I've actually always wanted to go to culinary school myself. And so maybe I'll put that on my, retirement bucket list.
You should.
That's awesome. Okay, so now you are developing recipes professionally, which is super cool. I have just began to like dabble in this myself for like my own kitchen. And I can tell listeners who have not done this that it's way harder than you would think, or at least I find that's the case, where it comes with a lot of instinct from having cooked a lot and a lot of different ways, different cuisine types, and basically comes down to testing until you get it right. And I find when I talk to friends and family members and listeners about how they like to cook, it's either two schools of thought. Like typically people either just like wing dinner or they work from a recipe that somebody else has created. And for our family, I find that to make the most of my time, but also our grocery budget, I have to know what I'm going to make that week. Otherwise, it's kind of like all things go off the rails and takeaway becomes a greater possibility. So for me, it's like when I think of meal prep, meal planning is actually part of that. And so I'm curious, as a recipe developer and cook yourself, what do you look for in a recipe when you're doing your meal planning?
Sure. Great questions. So I, thinking about this, and I have to say, obviously, I know that I am not the same as everybody else because I do develop recipes, and I recognize that, my approach is probably different, just in the sense that I always have odds and ends in my pantry and freezer and all the items from testing and developing recipes. So a lot of times I end up like cobbling things together because I don't like wasting food. So I'm always trying to find ways to use those for meals. But that doesn't mean I don't do some planning too. And obviously I'm not developing and testing recipes every day. So I have to, and I have a family. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. So they have lots of
quirks when it comes to food.
Quirks and extra needs, all of the lunches they need to pack, the endless snacks, so all of that. But I do think that there is something to be said about planning ahead. I do also think that phrase can really stress people out, because I think sometimes people are like, okay, well, I didn't fully plan this week. It's Sunday. Like, what am I going to do the following week? And it turns them into it turns it into a stressful situation. So I think for me, the best advice that I can give on that end is to make sure that you always have these essential items that your family loves and eats in your kitchen. So sort of stocking everything, right? And obviously, you can't do that with lots of perishable items, but that might be like the sort of outstanding factor. Like that you have to get a bunch of vegetables and fruits, and that's like on your grocery list. But I always think it's important to have some of those, again, and every family's different, right? Having those pantry items, like we eat a lot of beans in our family, and we eat a lot of grinds. So I always have like ground chicken and beef in the freezer, and salmon, so that like I know I can pull that out and keep it like a super simple dinner. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but there's always a protein there for us, right? Crushed and diced tomatoes and frozen peas, any frozen vegetables I think are really great too. I know that over the years they've had not a great reputation, but the reality is that they're really as good as fresh. They're flash frozen. So like if in a pinch you can pull them out and you have your vegetable there. Of course, cheeses, bread I always freeze. And also the essential, cooking elements, like, I always have garlic on hand. I always have butter on hand. There's this company called Challenge Butter that makes these new cubes, and so everything they're packaged in 4 tablespoon servings, so it makes it like super easy. You only have to open like one packet at a time, and it's a really easy convenience item. So again, I think that packing your home with as much as you can that again, your family loves is a really good approach. And that's what I would have to say about that.
Yeah, that's, I mean, so many great pieces of advice in that. Like, yeah, definitely having those staple items. And it's not, I know, my husband and I, we've moved to town. We own our home now, and thankfully have a bigger kitchen. But some of the apartments we lived in had like teeny tiny kitchens, and you can still have some of your staples without having like 20 cans of black beans. It's like, okay, making sure you have like those 2 cans, or the
exactly. That's all I have.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
And the butter is a great tip too. I do something similar with like flour, where I buy it in bulk from a local bakery that like mills their flour here, but then I just have like a smaller jar of it in my kitchen. And like with the butter, it's like you can pull it out, and you're not, I don't know if anyone else has like done this, but with like traditional larger butter, where it's like you end up pulling the whole thing out, inevitably it gets warm, and then it's kind of gone through like that heat cool cycle, and it's kind of gross, and like you're just not inspired by it. And so it's like, find ingredients and like ways to buy your ingredients where it is like fresh and exciting. And I talk about having almost like a market pantry in our kitchen. So we have this hutch that sits in our kitchen, and I have all sorts of like little baskets and bowls, but I've got my onions in there and garlic, and one, it's pretty to look at, but two, it also is inspiring. And I feel like if I don't have a meal plan, it's like I can look at that and be like, okay, I've got garlic, I've got beans, I know I've got some chopped spinach in the freezer, and you have supplies where you can throw something together if need be, and it's still nutritious because it's like you sourced all these good ingredients. So
totally, I have a setup like that too. It's like a little rolling like a little 3-tiered like rolling shelf sort of thing, where I have all the produce that I can keep out, and like you said, onions and garlic and potatoes and all those things last quite some time. But and I think like having these pantry items, these fridge staples, freezer staples, they're great because you don't have to. I think it's important to keep in mind that your food, first of all, people are doing so much by just putting together a meal from scratch, right? Like, it doesn't have to be overthought. It can be simple, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a different, you can repeat dishes every week. It doesn't have to be overly seasoned or overly extravagant. It just, a lot of times, I mean, for me, I'm feeding my family, and we just enjoy having dinner together. So it doesn't have to be overly complicated.
For sure. I was just having dinner with friends the other night, and we were talking about how excited we were that the here in Boise, that the farmers markets are like back up in full swing.
Oh,
and
I'm so excited.
It's the best. And we were like talking about like, what is it about the farmers market that is so different from grocery shopping in the middle of the year? And it is that, like, one, the vegetables and everything seem and probably are like much more fresh, but two, it's like you just tend to cook more simply with them, and it's like the ingredient is the recipe. Like, it doesn't need a whole bunch of extra fluff. It's just good. And so that's kind of a testament to them.
Salt and pepper and some good butter, and you're set.
Exactly. So, okay, so when you are going to like a traditional grocery store, is there anything that like you implement that saves you time or money or both when you're doing your grocery shopping?
Yeah. So even though, I talked about, how I cook on a whim a lot of times, I also always make a list. So I kind of do both of the things. There's this app that I have that I love called AnyList. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No, I love a good app though.
I love it. It helps me, for my home life and also my job, because I can split up shopping lists for the different projects that I'm working on. But I love that I can keep, and you can like name your lists and organize them, but you can basically just keep this running list. And when you think of things, I don't know if you're anything like me, but something will pop into my head when I'm like, uh, picking my kid up from school, and I'll be like, oh gosh, we need to get some more apples or whatever it is, right? Like I'll just hop on. I have my phone with me, so I'll just like add it to the list. So I love AnyList. You check off the items as you're shopping, and you can organize it by like department or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, that helps me because there's inevitably something that I'm gonna forget.
Yep.
I do think that obviously depending on, resources and where people live, grocery delivery apps can be wonderful to save time. There certainly can be more expensive, unless people, obviously there's memberships, like annual or monthly memberships that people can buy. But sometimes if I'm in a really tight time crunch, I'll use those, and I love that it saves like your favorite items, and you can kind of just like re-add all that stuff so quickly. And sometimes I'll just do pickup so that I don't pay the delivery fee or whatever, and at least it saved me all that time from like searching around the grocery store.
Yes, exactly. I'm a huge, I like live and die by Instacart, and if Trader Joe's would get on Instacart, it's like, I don't know if I'd ever go to a grocery store again.
I know. But and then I was going to say on the flip side of that, on the money savings, obviously there's sale tabs in the delivery apps, but to truly save money, I find grocery shopping, I'm probably one of the odd people, but I find it pleasurable because I always like to see what's new, and it's a fun, inspirational experience for me. But anyway, going to the grocery store, if you have time, is often the best choice for finding deals, and also getting inspiration. I'll just wander in. Produce is first, and so that's where I always go. Or it's right in front of my store, so I end up there, and then I sort of build my meals around that. I'm like, oh, okay, so asparagus is on sale today. I'll pick up 2 bunches, and I'll find like maybe I'll shift around some of the other ingredients on my list. But like if it's a great deal, like I don't need that. I don't need broccoli today. I'll get the asparagus or whatever. So I think like being in store for those items, catching those sales is the best.
Yeah, love that. And then when you get home, are you the kind of person that just like empties the grocery bags into like the fridge and freezer or pantry, or are you doing like some prep or taking steps now to make like your cooking process easier later on?
Sure. Yes, I do empty the bags straight into the fridge, freezer, pantry. I do have an organizational method though. Like I feel like for me, the time saver is like I put the groceries away because I'm the one that's cooking, and I want to know exactly where everything is. Well, my kids always want to help me, but I'm like, all right, now I feel like they now know where things go. But I empty everything right away. I do know that people love to, some people love to, prep ahead of time, and, cut up all their veggies, get things ready, wash produce. I still feel like obviously that takes time. So whether you want to dedicate it then, immediately or later, that's people's personal preference. I kind of just wait till I'm truly ready. Um, but to save, I think my biggest time saver that I can offer is making a double batch of whatever you're making, if possible, right? Like, I know it doesn't work for everything, but I think when I'm cooking, that's when I'm saving the time later on. So again, I know that like that you have to think about um, shopping for all of those things, but I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you're making a soup, like, double the recipe and then freeze the other half for another time, right? Because you're already putting in the effort to make this meal. And so how amazing is it to be able to, like, dip into your freezer in a pinch, and you have this homemade meal that you made, weeks or months ago.
Yeah. And so many, I don't know if you find this, but I feel like so many meals that I've made and that I freeze, because we do that a lot as well, like, taste better. And
Oh
maybe it's
yeah,
because, like, you're not having to, like, cook it, and it just feels like fresh. They say, like, as you're cooking, like, scientifically, it's like you've smelled it and you're tasting it, like, as you go along. And so by the time you're actually, like, sitting down to dinner, it's, like, less exciting. Whereas your partner or who your family, whoever you're serving, it's fresh to them because they weren't part of that process necessarily.
sure.
And so I feel like when I get that experience when I'm pulling it out of the freezer, it's like, just shows up. It's amazing.
I know, it's like takeout, but, like, the best, the best kind. Yeah, and you're right. Like, some of these things also, like, taste better as they sit, right? Like the soups, the stews, I do a lot of braised meats that I'll freeze, and we'll use them for tacos or quesadillas, or um, serve them over mashed potatoes, whatever. But yeah, I think if possible, making things ahead or a double batch is a great time saver. While it might not feel like it in the moment, you'll thank yourself. Your future self will thank you.
Absolutely. And honestly, that's probably, like, a good cost saving tip too, because if you get you can get
Hmm.
a larger cut of meat on sale, or if you're not paying for it to, like, be broken down by the butcher, a lot of times it will be more cost effective. And so, I would say, listeners, like, don't be afraid to cook a larger amount of meat than you necessarily need for your family, and then, like, freeze it, because you're compounding that meal over time, and gonna save some money
Right?
that way, and time.
For sure.
So what about the actual cooking process? Please bestow your culinary wisdom on us. Like, what are some of the, like, ways that you like to pack flavor into the meals that you're creating?
Sure. So I guess a couple things. This might sound fussy, but it truly isn't. It's not as intimidating as it sounds, but homemade stock. Um, and usually in those cases, I make it pretty often because we often find ourselves with a shortcut, which is a rotisserie chicken. I love rotisserie chicken. But again, I had mentioned earlier, I don't like to waste food, and I feel like the carcass from a rotisserie chicken is, like, one of the best flavor producers that we can buy, that we didn't actually put the work into. So I save it, and then either while I'm cooking, or later on, I can you can throw it in a Ziploc bag or container and do it later. But it takes like a half hour, and it's pretty hands off. You're just throwing in like half an onion and a couple carrots, so you don't even have to peel, and a couple garlic cloves, and bay leaves and some peppercorns, and filling it with water. So it's like literally just comes to a simmer. You let it sit. You can have it sit certainly longer than 30 minutes. But for me, the homemade stock is something that I love to do. And it makes, again, I freeze it. And I just always have some around. And sometimes it ends up being like a quick way to make a soup. And you don't really have to add that many flavor elements when you're making your soup later, because you have this like beautiful stock that you made. So that, I I think that we can go back to butter. I'm from the Midwest. So originally I live on the East Coast now, but I think that we were talking about these like pre-portioned cubes, and I think that for me that is an easy way to add flavor to any dish. I make a lot of pasta at home. We love our carby noodles. So I'm always finishing the pasta at the end with a couple tablespoons of butter, just turning off the heat and melting it in. It makes like these really, really velvety noodles and truly adds like just richness and flavor to a dish. You can also you can use it for other one pan dishes. I make a lot of, casseroles. Whether it's like twists on things that I grew up eating, like a chicken and broccoli casserole, or something maybe new and fresh. I always like to have. I think that casseroles benefit from texture, so I love having like a crunchy topping crumbled over it. So having melting in butter with whatever the topping is, tortillas or panko breadcrumbs or crackers is a nice way to add flavor and texture to a meal.
Mm-hmm.
So butter. Butter makes everything better.
Oh, it sure does.
And then, one of the things I was going to say too is, we talked about a homemade stock, but on the flip side of things, I feel like it's really important for people to take shortcuts when they need to. Like, again, not everything has to be homemade. I certainly don't make everything homemade. I always have some ready-made items in the freezer, or again in the pantry, and maybe it's not for every meal, but there's definitely certain nights of the week where it's part of the meal. Like I always have dumplings, for example, and I feel like you can sort of use those to get you to a full nutritious meal. It doesn't, you can add the dumplings to some of that homemade stock you have, and add some spinach in there, and you have like a little bit of a soup. So I think that using shortcuts, you shouldn't have to feel guilty about it. I think people should make that part of their repertoire.
Yeah, I love that. Well, so many good tips there. My gosh, you're making me hungry. It's early in the morning here, and I've not had my breakfast yet. So now I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go make some buttery eggs here in a little bit. But
sounds good to me.
I know. Before I go do that, I wanted to talk to you about something really exciting you've got going on, which is a cookbook that you have co-authored. So I would love if you tell listeners about it, when it's coming out, where they can pre-order, and then maybe like a little hint about what you're most excited about in the book.
Sure. So in February of 2026, so just around the corner, I'm co-authoring a book with my pal Nina Elder, and it's National Geographic's National Park Cookbook. And so this book features recipes that are inspired by, the flora and fauna of all 63 national parks. I think people will be surprised that the book isn't, I think maybe people think, oh, it's a book about the parks. It's going to be camping food or, all this like outdoor food. Sure, there's a couple recipes in there that you could take on hikes. Like I have this recipe for no-bake granola bars. But there's also really elevated food because there's some beautiful lodges and restaurants that are around the park, in or around the park. So we have, recipes like bison ossobuco in there too. So it was a really fun book to put together, and I can't wait to share it with everyone. You can pre-order it now, and it's available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, a bunch of places, but I can't wait.
Oh, that's so exciting. Listeners, just so you don't have to go search for it, I will have a link to the National Parks Cookbook pre-order in the show notes. So go and show Melissa and Nina some love, as well as National Geographic and pre-order. I love pre-ordering books. I tend to actually do it with like cookbooks or design books, and I usually do it like right as they become available. And then it's the best surprise happy mail because months go by and I forget that I've ordered this, and then I get my random Amazon package and I'm like, oh, what is this? And then it's like divine providence. I swear they come when I'm in like a cooking rut or a design rut and needing some inspiration. And the book gods are like, oh, here you go. So I'll be heading to that pre-order link myself after our call here. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Melissa. Tell listeners where they can find you.
Sure. So I have my own website. It's melissaknific.com. But look for me on Instagram. Just my name, @Melissa Knific.
And I'll also have a link, listeners, to the where you can buy locator for those challenge butter cubes so that you can stop just chipping away at your giant block of butter and it going bad or being a mess. And we'll have all the links for Melissa's Instagram and website in the show notes as well. But thank you, Melissa, so much for your time today and sharing all of your tips and tricks. And I just really enjoyed chatting with you today.
I did too. Thanks so much for having me. I can't wait to hear what and see what everybody's making next.
Same. Well, until next week, happy homemaking, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Untraditionally Traditional. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with those special people who would love it too, and write a review. For more tips and photos of my home and garden, follow Untraditionally Traditional Pod on Instagram. Until next week, let's continue to make our homes places of joy and service to ourselves and those we share them with.